As a borrower, Matt Rodak founded Fund That Flip because he found the process of faxing handwritten 6-page forms to his hard money lender was probably one he could do better. Welcome to the National Real Estate Forum Podcast, episode 233. Thanks for joining me today. I'm Dr. Adam Gower, and this is the nationalrealestateforum.org, where I speak to leaders of the crowdfund real estate industry, so that you can learn how to raise capital, build wealth, and earn passive income from crowdfund real estate deals. It's a big leap for a sponsor to decide to move from the usual face-to-face world of raising equity for their deals to moving to the online world. But actually there's very little difference between the two because the process remains the same. It's just the delivery method and timescale that's different. The usual process is someone, arrange a meeting, prepare some presentation materials, and then sit with that someone to walk them through the sponsor's background and to explain the deal. Online, the content remains the same, but all the steps are recorded and presented to investors in digitized format, in videos or audio recordings or in PDFs, and delivered through automated communication systems. If you'd like to know more about how to do this, go to the show notes page for today's podcast at the nationalrealestateforum.org website at nreforum.org/Matt and click the link at the top of the page. Matt Rodak, my guest today, is founder and CEO at Fund That Flip. Matt found an opportunity to disrupt the hard money lending space when he was borrowing money from lenders, but found the process to be unwieldy and inefficient. Not only that, but he wanted to reconcile the contradiction that he saw between the relatively low returns he was getting in his personal investments in unsecured consumer debt and the significant he was getting in his personal investments in unsecured consumer debt and the significantly higher rates he was paying for his real estate secured loans. Be sure to check out the show notes for today's episode at nreforum.org/Matt for more information on Matt, his company, and for more information about how to crowdfund your deals. I'm dying to hear about your background, and I'm gonna pre-frame, if you don't mind, let me pre-frame the question with this question. Are you a tech company or a real estate company?
It's a great question. I would say we're probably more of a technology-enabled real estate company.
Okay. All right, so put some meat on that and tell me where you come from and who you are and how did you get into, what gave you the idea for this business?
Yeah, it's perfect. So my background, I'm originally from and ended up doing a lot of work for real estate investors, so people that were primarily either flipping houses or buying rental properties and fixing them up and then tenanting them out. And these guys would hire me to come in to not only do the landscaping, but occasionally, my truck and trailers and, 3 or 4 buddies, from the football team would come in and also help with the demos of the houses. Mm. So I got to see a lot of projects kind of at an early age go from, the ugliest house on the block to one of the nicest house on the block. And I'd also see, these guys parading their checks around town about how much money they were making on the flips. It was just, totally fascinated with, the transformation of the property as well as, the opportunity to kind of work for yourself and make a good living. So at about that same age, I said, that's what I want to do when I grow up. I want to be a real estate investor. So sold the landscaping business off, paid for college, studied finance with an idea of getting into real estate development post-graduation. Fortunately, or college, studied finance with an idea of getting into real estate development post-graduation. Fortunately, or maybe unfortunately, I graduated in 2007, right when the whole real estate world was more or less kind of imploding on itself. So not a great time to get into the business, and with college tuition bills to pay, I took a job with a large commercial property insurance company and risk management company, that insured about a third of the Fortune 500 companies and Global 500 companies, and worked my way up through the ranks there to the point where I was running sales and marketing for their middle market group, which is about a $900 million company. Got a lot of great exposure to business and was involved as a subject matter expert on some technology developments and helped, rehang our sales processes and marketing processes and alignment and CRM systems and a lot of really cool strategic projects and a lot of exposure as well to the executive team of the business. at a pretty young age, got to learn a lot about a lot of things and kind of a risk management and and underwriting perspective to that job as well. The biggest thing I think I learned was that I didn't want to be a corporate insurance executive for the rest of my life. And 2010, 2011, the real estate market's starting to come back around, and thought, well, why don't I get back into my initial passion and start a real estate business? So had a little money saved up, started to buy houses to fix and flip and potentially rent out, with my exit strategy being, build a large enough business here and kind of retire, if you will, from corporate America and go run this real estate empire. Through that kind of exercise of flipping a couple properties, I learned of the hard money lending industry, which at the time was charging 4 points and 14% interest without a whole lot of great customer experience. So the guy that I'd borrow from had a 4 or 6 page application that had to be filled out by hand and scanned and faxed, and it was just an overall bad experience. And I thought, man, I think I could probably build a better lender. And at the same time, I was doing some investing on Lending Club and Prosper, the peer-to-peer lending sites, and they were still pretty new back in 2010, 11, and 12, and I was clipping maybe a 9 or 10% return on those investments and paying out 18 to 20% on my hard money. And I'm scratching my head saying, this makes no sense. Why am I receiving a 9% return on unsecured consumer credit, while I'm paying 18% or more on a first lien? I've got 20%, 25% equity, kind of in a first loss position, to this guy, right? What's up? Something's out of whack in terms of the efficiency around how capital is formed in this hard money lending space. So light bulb kind of went off in my head of why can't I create a Lending Club or Prosper for real estate investing, specifically, the single family space? There seems to be a demand for yield, and arguably, right, this asset class is better because there's a real asset behind it as opposed to just a consumer's promise to pay you back. And that was kind of where the idea of Fund That Flip came from. So this was actually all pre-Jobs Act.
Very interesting, really.
Yeah, I had taken the idea to my father-in-law, who's a former SEC attorney, and over Thanksgiving in 2012, and he said, great idea, but you can't do it legally without a lot of expense, and kind of here's why: you can't sell securities online, and there's a thing called general solicitation, you can't do it, blah, blah, blah. Anyways, the idea it was one of these ideas that just kept me up at night, literally, to the point where I eventually did enough research and stumbled across the offerings are, and then what a Regulation A offering is, and bumped across Fundrise, who was doing some Reg A stuff even before the Jobs Act, and followed that rabbit hole down deep enough until finally I stumbled across, at the time, was somewhat of an obscure bill called the Jobs Act, which is still kind of being debated on the floor of Congress. Read the whole thing in a weekend and said, this is going to pass. And if I'm reading it right, when it does, it's going to make what I want to do a lot easier. So I kind of took it back to my father-in-law, and he introduced me to some attorneys within his firm that were also tracking the bill. And we started to kind of more or less put together a framework that would allow us to do what we wanted to do in terms of having a quote-unquote crowdfunding platform for real estate. And then, the rest is history. Kind of moved down to New York City from Rhode Island, where I was living at the time, and started building a team and some technology and trying to work towards getting, deal number 1 done, figuring that we'd learn a lot through that process, and then take what we learned and do a second, third, fourth, and on up from there. That's a lot.
Let's see. So you spent a weekend reading through the Jobs Act, presumably after it was passed or soon after. You're quite right. Fundrise were doing some very creative stuff. And interestingly, you'll probably find interesting, so were Rich Uncles. They had been busy in Texas doing some stuff some years before, actually. So what exactly did you do then at the time? Let's kind of get granular. What exactly did you do? You read this thing, you discussed it with your father-in-law, and what did he say about it? What was his opinion of how this would affect things, and how did you then act? I mean, exactly what did you do to try and make something happen out of this new regulation?
Yeah, so I'm not a lawyer, and I'm not by any means the smartest guy in the world. But what I knew from the feedback that I'd gotten was that the thing that was prohibiting me from doing what I wanted to do with burden was the general solicitation, right? So the idea of offering up the opportunity to invest in something without having a pre-existing relationship with that person was really kind of the thing that was the this is why you can't do it. So after reading the Jobs Act, it became pretty clear to me that what they were trying to do was remove that general solicitation ban and allow, businesses to offer up investment opportunities to investors, so long as you followed kind of a certain set of rules, primarily of which being, you need to kind of take reasonable steps to confirm that any money that you do take comes from an accredited investor.
My new book, Leaders of the Crowd, published by Palgrave Macmillan, is available for pre-order now. It's a fascinating chronicle of how crowdfund real estate came to be. Pre-order your copy today at leadersofthecrowd.com. It came to be. Pre-order your copy today at leadersofthecrowd.com. You connected the dot to real estate because you'd had a conversation with your father-in-law already, who had clearly said general solicitation is the problem for you. And then you read this document that was geared to businesses that said, we're going to remove that requirement. We're going to allow for general solicitation. And a light bulb went off, right? You thought, this is going to work for me too, in real estate.
Yeah, it was that, and then it was a little bit of like, some of his concerns were, well, are you raising like a blind pool where you're just going to raise money and then go invest in that real estate? And there's some precedent in the 80s of like how those went like really bad with a lot of fraud. So like, that was something that I was kind of looking at, and then also like the registered investment advisory kind of rules around, are you going to be making recommendations, or like how do you kind of like, do you want to be a registered investment advisor? And if so, it just kind of started to fall in place to me as like, well, I think we're good on all of this because the general solicitation is the big one, right? The blind pool goes away because we're not investing on behalf of investors, right? We're presenting to them opportunities on the platform, and they get to pick which investments they go into. And along the same lines that the RIA kind of, rules is like, we don't recommend any of our investments. We just present them. We present the facts and let the investors more or less kind of, come to their own determination on whether or not it's an investment that fits kind of their individual risk return profile based on that set of facts that we produce. So yeah, I think it was kind of like understanding on the front end, like what were the no-nos, if you will, and then saying like, well, can this work within the framework that, is now being presented as part of the Jobs Act? And the answer seemed to be a yes.
Okay, so what was it that gave you the idea to create a platform rather than just think, gosh, this is a great way I can fund my own portfolio?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I learned about, being an operator was that, one, it's very hard to scale. You've got to have a lot of good people to operate the projects. You've got to be able to source products. You've got to understand your market really well, right? So if I was flipping in Providence, Rhode Island, like I knew that market well and I could feel comfortable investing there. But if I wanted to go even to Boston, right, like it's a different market that I have to get smart on. So the idea of being a lender seemed to be more scalable to me, right? You're leveraging a lot of local sponsors' expertise to the extent that you can align incentives appropriately with them and make sure you're partnering with people that have some experience and can demonstrate some competency around their markets and how to manage a project. You leverage other people and their unique kind of ability to find properties, manage those properties, et cetera. And to me, the lending piece was a much more scalable business. By one of my tech co-founders likes to say is like, the people that got rich in the gold rush were not the prospectors. They're the people like making the shovels.
Exactly. They made the Levi's jeans, right? Yeah.
Right. So like I look at this business and say like this is a shovel manufacturing business as opposed to a prospecting business. Not as sexy maybe, but higher probability of scalability and wealth creation by leveraging all the people that do want to go out and actually dig for gold, if you will.
That's fascinating. All right, so the light bulb went off and you figured that there was a scalable way of benefiting from the regulatory changes. What did you do next then? You said you moved to New York. How did you, really literally, what were the steps that you took? How did you put this thing together?
Yeah, so it was a little bit of like...
Thing together.
Yeah, so it was a little bit of like, it's probably going to be hard to build this business in Rhode Island. I'm also not in a position that I necessarily want to quit my day job and go all in on this, because there's still just so many unknowns around, will this work? Will borrowers want to borrow, or will investors want to invest? Can we originate loans, et cetera, et cetera? Can we raise money? And I thought, well, it can probably increase my chances of success if I'm in an environment that has other entrepreneurs and fintech companies, et cetera. So New York was right down 95 from Rhode Island. And I like to say, a lot of my success, and I think probably a lot of entrepreneur success, is like a function of timing, right? Like I came up with the idea, the Jobs Act thing was kind of like happening around the same time I was coming up with the idea. I had enough experience in this space. And lo and behold, a job opening within my company opened up in New York City that like was a good fit for me. So be able to really start to build this thing kind of nights and weekends. So enrolled in the Founder Institute, which is like a don't quit your day job incubator kind of program that walks you through a 13 or 14 week process around, how to go from an idea that's in your head into something that's a little bit more real. So everything from branding and marketing to product market fit to building a financial model. I kind of cover all of that in 13 weeks. I think we had like 40 or 50 people start the class, and we finished with like 12. So it does a pretty good job of like helping people realize that either their idea sucks or like they're not cut out for this type of effort. But what it did for me is it also validated like maybe I really do have something here. In kind of post graduation, if you will, they give you some good advice of like build an advisory team, start to build some tech and some MVP, and really press towards your first customer. So that's what I did. I brought on an advisory board that had a lot more experience even than I did in real estate investing and raising capital. And those guys helped us really kind of push from an idea into something that was real. And one of them even then joined as a co-founder and our COO, and helped kind of really grow the business once we all determined that we were onto something pretty cool.
It's a really fascinating story, Matt. So while you were just backing up a little bit, while you were at doing the founders course, were there any kind of Eureka moments that tripped you into considerable enthusiasm for what you were doing, and excitement and kind of realization you were really onto something?
Yeah, I think the big aha moment for me going through that program was, we have a marketplace business, right? So we have sponsors or borrowers on one side and investors, or we call them lenders, right? The guys that are writing the passive checks, on the other side. My initial assumption was that the more important of the two was the money side, the investor side. Like we had to build a platform, and our main value proposition was geared towards them. And the other side, like they needed the money. They would find us, like they would just kind of, if we build it, they will come kind of a thing. The very quick realization was that like it's actually the other way, right? Like and this now makes sense to me, and I even understood it as an operator. But if you have a good deal, like the money's out there that will fund it. So I think the big aha moment for me was like, when the question is who's your customer, like our customer, it's obviously both, but like where we spend most of our marketing dollars and where we spend most of our energy from a sales perspective is actually on the sponsor side. So getting the good deals in, and how do we make their lives easier, and with our unique value proposition to our ability then to get the other side, because if we do have good products, and if we have better product relative to our competitors, and if we can offer a better risk-adjusted return, that money just has naturally for us just flowed in. So I think that was really the big aha moment for me. Was like, oh, like, well, this is a good thing for me, because like that's the side I know better, right? So how do we build a messaging and kind of unique value proposition for that audience, so that we can grow the business the way that we want to grow it.
So when was this that you moved to New York, Matt? Exactly, do you remember?
Oh man, now you got me second guessing all my timelines.
I don't mean to do that. Gosh.
I think it was. So I moved. I'm working backwards. I moved in the fall of 2013, because I incorporated the business. I know for sure in 2004. In the fall of 2013, because I incorporated the business. I incorporated the business, I know for sure, in 2014. When I went through the Founder Institute program, kind of the winter of 13 and 14.
Okay, so right at that time now, here you are in New York. You're working on building a business in your spare time. The business is beginning to crystallize in your mind. What were you doing on a practical level, apart from building the board and getting some advice? What were you doing on a practical level to build the business itself and to try and pull all the pieces together and to finance it, for that matter?
Yeah, so I mean, I think, and this is something that I learned too, is especially in the early days, and it still I think applies today, is like there's always gonna be more to do than time to do it in. So you've got to get good at figuring out like what's the most important thing to get done to like advance you to the next stage for us to raise money. We got that figured out, right, and kind of felt pretty good about that. And then it was like, okay, now I got this, like, kind of need at least some framework of a technology platform so investors can invest and see deals and borrowers can sign up and submit deals. So we hacked together, a minimal viable product or MVP from a technology perspective. And I spent just a lot of time on that. All right, now I think I've got kind of the foundational pieces that I need to do a transaction. Mm-hmm. Let's see if we can get a transaction in the pipeline. So then it was, really sales and marketing to the borrower side of our business to see if I could get a real deal on the hook and have something to fund. And kind of simultaneously while I was doing that is I had created a kind of a fake project. I was shopping it around to potential investors, like on one-on-one coffee meetings, saying like, hey, if I bring you a deal that looks like this, would you be interested? Like on one-on-one coffee meetings, saying like, hey, if I bring you a deal that looks like this, would you be interested in writing a $10,000 check or $15,000 check to finance it at a 10% return? I got enough of those to say like, okay, if I do get one in the hook, like I probably got $300,000 worth of yeses lined up. Half of them will flake out. So as long as my first loan is under 150, like I should be able to actually deliver to the borrower. And it was just a matter of kind of like of doing that, right? So we got our first borrower on the loan, or on the hook, I should say, and then it was like, well, how do I actually originate a loan? I've never done that before. So finding some good representation from a legal perspective and getting our loan documents drafted and reviewed, and then we originated our first loan.
And so what would you remember that first deal?
Yeah, it was in Trumbull, Connecticut. I think the address is 4126 Madison Avenue, Trumbull, Connecticut. The guy bought it for a great deal. He made a killing on it, which was good for us too, because it was a good kind of notch in our belt from getting valuation right and underwriting right and all that good stuff. I think it paid off inside of like 5 or 6 months as well. So it allowed us to return some principal to our early investors and wash, rinse, and repeat that that capital into the subsequent deals.
So what were the biggest challenges? Again, very, very early on. What were the biggest hurdles that you faced?
Definitely the in a marketplace business, liquidity is very important, right? So, you have to have enough deals to attract the capital. You have to have enough capital to be able to actually feel good about funding the deals. So it's like any marketplace business, right? Even eBay, right? If you have a ton of people listing stuff for sale but no one buying it, like you lose. That was certainly a challenge for us, and we figured out about 6 or 7 months into our actually having funded our first loan, some ways to kind of, I call it, cheat the liquidity on the capital side. So we got some commitments from some larger, funds here in New York to commit to funding a certain percentage of our loans early on, which allowed us then to just more focus on building the deal flow on the borrower side. And then as we got more deals, more investors were interested, and things just kind of started to snowball to the point now we launched a deal this week that sold out, I think, in like 6.5 minutes to our investor base. So, and like I said, we've largely grown that side organically through word of mouth and doing podcasts like this and what have you. But we generally don't pay a lot, in marketing dollars for new investors. Again, kind of with the idea being as if we're originating good product, people will talk about us and find us and dip their toe in the water with a couple $1,000, let us perform, and then, for that allocation over time.
So when you were very early on, were you aware of other people doing similar things? You already told me you had a sense that Fundrise were doing stuff, but were there any other real estate crowdfunding companies that you were aware of right at the very beginning, or did you feel like you were, pioneering a new path?
I very, very much was aware of all of them. I think, Realty Mogul actually went through the same Founder Institute program we did. They just went through it out in LA. We went through it here in New York. Patch of land popped up pretty quickly. Realty Shares. For me, it was validation that like we're on to something here. And then, as those guys started to raise big rounds of venture capital, I was like, okay, we're really on to something here. My belief kind of, and maybe this comes from my experience operating some real estate stuff and kind of knowing the market. My belief always was like fast, nor will it be a winner take all market. I think, real estate is local enough, regional enough, and kind of specialized enough that there'll be a number of players that can carve out their own little niches in the market and be successful. So it never kind of scared me, I wouldn't say. I think to some extent it informed our strategy. I mean, our name is Fund That Flip, which is pretty descriptive around what we do. And kind of, again, my background was commercial property insurance and like a 185-year-old company that only did one thing. They only did property insurance, but they had 33% of market share. So like my view on this business when we started it was like, I don't really care to finance strip shopping malls or apartment buildings or office buildings. We're only going to do flips, and we're going to do it really well, and we're going to develop a certain level of expertise around it. And a lot of the other platforms were doing anything. My belief early on was like, that's cool, but like they're going to have to make a decision on whether or not they want to be in the flip business, because like it's got to be a high transaction volume business to make money in it. And if you're just doing it because like it's there, like it's going to be difficult for them to sustain. And that kind of proved out. Realty Mogul, Fundrise, and Realty Shares are all out of the fix and flip business now, whereas that's where a lot of them started. So yeah, I maybe gave you more than you wanted there, but it was definitely aware of all of them.
No, it's extremely interesting. What are the biggest challenges that you have today? Actually, tell me, how big are you now? Right, so you told me about $150,000. Where are you today?
Yeah, so we've got 30 employees within the company. We opened an office actually in Cleveland, Ohio, back where I'm from, in 2017, which is where we've got our front office, so all of our sales, underwriters, we've got our front office, so all of our sales, underwriters, loan coordinators, client success. We have some marketing and finance people there as well. But anybody that kind of has a touch to the client is in Cleveland.
Okay.
We did that partially for cost reasons, right? It's expensive here in New York to have office space and pay people a comfortable living wage, and Cleveland offers us a lot of benefits there. But Cleveland's also like, I think, a 6 or 7 hour drive to something like 70% of the country's population. So it provides a nice jumping off point for us to go out and see our clients. You asked me earlier on, are we a technology company or a real estate company? I believe that real estate is going to remain somewhat of a relationship-driven business. So we still make a pretty big effort to get out in front of our clients and in our markets on at least a quarterly basis to keep our finger on the pulse of what's happening there, but also develop those relationships with our people. So Cleveland provides us a good jumping off, but also develop those relationships with our people. So Cleveland provides us a good jumping off point for that. So yeah, I mean, our goal within the next couple of years is to build towards $1 billion per year origination platform, and we've been hitting kind of our growth targets really since we raised some venture capital money in 2016 to get there. But still some work to be done for sure.
Yeah, tell me about the venture funding. What was that process like, and why did you decide to go that route? And what was the process of actually raising money that way?
Yeah, so we've kind of taken the approach of like build a business that creates value, and similar to how we think about funding projects on our platform, like the investors will be there. We were introduced to this fund through a kind of a mutual connection, and he liked what we were doing and had some experience investing in banks and things in the past. The fund's name is Fintech Venture Fund. They're out of Atlanta, into quadrupling our business, tripling our business each year since then. And we're operating now towards kind of a break-even profitable business. So I think we've taken somewhat of a different approach of light money on fire for the sake of growth and chase valuation. Again, with kind of the idea being that this market will move at its own pace, no matter how much money you throw at it. Let's make sure that we're kind of growing in lockstep with how we think this market will eventually move from offline to online, and make sure that we're building a business that can, self-sustain, if you will.
So that's interesting. You said that you're moving towards break even. Is that stressful for you that you're not at break even yet?
Well, we more or less are break even. We had a profitable quarter last quarter and profitable fourth quarter last quarter. So I mean, we're managing the business to break even at this point.
And what is the biggest expense then?
We're managing the business to break even at this point.
And what is the biggest expense then that slows things down? Is it platform development or marketing? Or what is the big cost?
Generally, our investment is in people. So whether that's tech people to build out the technology, or salespeople to grow the book, or operations folks to make sure that our customers have good experiences. But it's the people business.
And what are the biggest challenges that you have at the moment? Or what are you trying to accomplish right now? Is it finding deals still, or is it on the tech side?
Yeah, I think it's always going to be finding deals. And I think that's probably consistent across any lender right now. It's a competitive time to be a lender. So we're always, looking for more creative ways to bring deal flow in and provide value. I think, generally speaking, the challenge for any, growing company is maintaining service and quality as you grow. So we're spending a lot of fees and controls around the different job functions to make sure that, we've been very successful from an underwriting perspective. We want to be able to maintain that profitability of our book, while we continue to chase additional growth. So the way to do that is, making sure you're hiring good people, they're trained, and then there's certain controls around what they can and can't do. And that's with work. I think we're doing a pretty good job of figuring it out.
Is there anything that you would like listeners to know, the headline elevator pitch, right? What is Fund My Flip from an investor perspective, or even from a borrower perspective? What are really the highlights that you'd love everybody to know?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think like anything else, right? Like there's a lot of noise out in the space right now, and broader than real estate crowdfunding, I think in the real estate lending space, right? So, I think from a borrower, get to know who your lender is, right? There's certainly the headlines around rates and terms and LTVs and how much leverage you can get, but I think get to understand kind of the servicing process and how do they process construction draws? Who is their team? Do they understand your type of project, and are they going to be able to service that type of project appropriately through the life of the loan? I think to some extent, like everyone is about the same on rate and terms, and are you going to get the service that you need post-closing to be able to, move through your project and get your construction draws and execute on the plan? So, I think that's becoming more and more important as we've, kind of reached somewhat efficiency on the pricing and leverage perspective. I think same thing for the investors, right? Like one of the reasons that I think a lot of our investors like us is we're specialists around this type of product. And I think the presumption, I think it's a safe one, is that we kind of know what we're doing. That I think a lot of our investors like us is we're specialists around this type of product. And I think the presumption, I think it's a safe one, is that we kind of know what we're doing, right? Like this is all we do. We'll look at $2 billion worth of loan applications this year. So we see a lot of deal flow, and we only accept a very small percentage of that. And we know how to handle the tough situations. We know how to operate a project. We got a guy down in Charlotte right now, helping one of our borrowers out of a difficult situation. So we know our space well, and we know how to underwrite it well. We know how to make sure that those returns to your investors are, in principle, have the highest likelihood of being paid back and hopefully earning a little bit of a return on it as well. So that's what I would say, I guess. Yeah.
And where do you think? So this is my actual final for the podcast. Where do you think the industry is headed, both for you and also kind of bigger picture crowdfunding real estate in general?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting question, right? So whether that's by asset class or by way of investing, right? We've seen some E-REITs pop up, leveraging the Reg A plus offerings, and different types of asset classes being added, to the platforms, both from a sponsor as well as investor perspective. I think another interesting angle, and I think this is probably a higher likelihood of where we go, is we become more of a platform business focused around that core customer. So can we offer additional financial services or technology services to our borrowers that are valuable, right? So think property casualty insurance, think software that helps them analyze their deals and develop, detailed statements of work and place orders at, the large big box distributors so their supplies can be purchased at discounts and delivered on time and paid for through the construction draw process.
Wow, that's really interesting.
Yeah, so I think there's directions like I'm not interested in necessarily opening up asset classes on our platform, but I'm super interested in how can we sell services to a borrower that simultaneously help de-risk the project for our investors, right? So if we're helping pick the property casualty insurance, like we know it's replacement cost value and the values are right and the flood insurance is there if it's needed and right, that helps de-risk that from an investor's perspective, right? If we're helping them comp their properties out better through our software product, like buyers are buying smarter, right, which helps de-risk the project. So that I think is where our platform trends towards.
That's really interesting. Things like discounts at Home Depot and Lowe's because you have such massive volume, like a club within a club kind of thing. Is that also something you thought about? Yeah.
Hundreds of millions of dollars being purchased from
because you have such massive volume, like a club within a club kind of thing. Is that also something you thought about? Yeah.
Hundreds of millions of dollars being purchased from those stores through our borrowers, right? Like there's some leverage there.
Fascinating. What a fascinating idea, Matt. Very interesting. Yeah. All right. Well, it's a real pleasure talking to you. Thanks so very much.
Yeah, this is great. Appreciate you having me on.
As a real estate guy, what are the key daily habits that you have to make you and your business successful? Personal habits.
Yeah, I think for me, I start every day and every week, even every month, with prioritizing what's important, right? So I have a kind of a mantra. I forget where I saw this. This is not mine. I stole it from someone, but there's this idea of what are your hands on, what are your eyes on, and what are your mind on? What is your mind on? So what do I need to be actively engaged with? Stuff. The eyes on are, what can I delegate? Who am I delegating it to, and how much kind of supervision do I need to provide to make sure that they can do their job well and move things forward? And then mind on, what am I thinking about in the shower or on the drive home in terms of percolating ideas and prioritizing what's eventually going to come into either the hands-on bucket or the eyes-on bucket, so that by the time I finish whatever I'm currently working on, I've got a pretty good sense for what's important next, and how I'm going to tactically tackle those things. So real estate or not, I think that's important in terms of, I think, I have to fight myself all the time on this, is like, there's things that come in that are easy to do and you want to do them because they're easy, but they still take up time, right? And making sure that you're putting your time into the things that are going to get you the highest return, either near term or longer term out. Things that are going to get you the highest return, either near term or longer term out.
Fascinating. Okay. And second question, what has been the hardest lesson you've learned in real estate so far?
Yeah, I think real estate's not like putting people on the moon. It's pretty straightforward. I think where I've made mistakes and where I've seen others make mistakes is when they lose discipline. So I think real estate can also be an emotional game where you fall in love with the asset or what the asset could be. I think that's where hard lessons are learned in turn. Instead of listening to your gut and being disciplined around the principles that you have or about what you will or won't do, and holding on too long, right? We've got some deals now that we've probably held on hope a little bit too long, where we should have just kind of cut our losses and walked away. But all that goes back to, I think, being disciplined around the numbers and ultimately listening to your gut when you know something doesn't feel right.
All right, and the final question. If you could give one piece of advice to somebody who has not yet invested in real estate but is considering investing online, what would that advice be?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of great information out there. We've put out white papers on, 7 things to consider around how to invest in real estate online, which kind of helps you think about a strategy around allocation and picking platforms and different things like that. So like, if we have it, I'm sure others do. I would, spend a good amount of time just doing some self-research on that and developing a perspective on what your strategy is. Do you want short duration loans? Do you want longer duration equity investments? Kind of I think figure that out first, and then narrow down a list of platforms that you think can help you achieve those goals and seem reputable and well funded, and then reach out to them. I'm surprised always about how many people will invest in our platform and email and have a list of questions of things that you maybe weren't able to get answered on our FAQ page or the website elsewhere, and let us help you through that decision, I guess. Yeah, that would be my advice, I think.
Matt was one of the early adopters taking advantage of real estate crowdfunding under the Jobs Act. He found a way to use the new regulations to set up his platform and to disrupt the traditional way hard money lenders manage their processes to provide debt to fix and flippers. Be sure to check out the show notes page for today's episode at the nationalrealestateforum.org website, nreforum.org/Matt, for more information on Matt and Fund That Flip, and to find out how you can raise equity capital for your deals, hit the link at the top of the page for more information. My next guest is Brian Daly, founder and principal at Ground Floor. My next guest is Brian Daly, founder and principal at Ground Floor. Ground Floor have found a way to present their deals to all investors, accredited and non-accredited alike, that is unique as far as I can tell, yet operates within the regulations set down by the Jobs Act. Be sure not to miss that episode by subscribing to the series at the nationalrealestateforum.org website, nreforum.org, and hitting any of the links that I've included about halfway down the homepage. Thanks for tuning in, and thank you also to Matt Rodak of Fund That Flip for sharing your time with me today. Until next time, this is Dr. Adam Gower